Welcome to Wealthing Talks. I am your host, Alicia Castillo Holley, bringing you real-life conversations from Silicon Valley or somewhere around the world. We will talk about disruptors, angel investments, venture capital, and of course, family offices. Join me along with my children, their families, friends, disruptors, and investors as we explore the fascinating world of creating wealth in a completely different and authentic way. Well, thank you everyone for being here. This is the Wealthing Podcast, and I am so honored and excited to introduce Sarah Dusek to you. She is the founder of Few and Far, and she'll tell you a little bit more about that. But she's also the founder of Enigma Ventures, and she's the author of a well-received book called Thinking Bigger for Women, which I had the pleasure of gifting it to my granddaughters. And I'm a very, very big fan of it. So Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here. How did you get here?
Yeah, how did I get here? That's such a great question. And you and I were just talking before we pressed the record button, and we're both saying that neither of us had ambitions to be entrepreneurs or VCs or to make a lot of money in our lives. And for me, I got here because I wanted to solve systemic problems, because I wanted to change the world, and because I wanted to make an impact. And so my business journey, I started working for nonprofit agencies before I worked in the business world. And I moved over to the business world because I realized that business has such a huge power to solve problems, to solve big problems and create sustainable solutions to them. So how I got here was a curiosity and a desire to impact and change the world.
Where is here for you now?
And here for me now is I'm currently down in Cape Town in South Africa. And about 5 years ago now, we launched a venture capital fund to invest in female entrepreneurs across the African continent. And this last year, I also returned to being a founder. I was a founder myself before I became a VC. I built a large company in the US, travel company, which we sold back in 2018. And this year we just launched our second travel company. So I am back on the entrepreneurial journey again, trying to grow and scale a company. So I am feeling the pain that early entrepreneurs feel all over again. And trying to grow and scale another impactful company.
That is so much fun. I love that. I love waking up in the middle of the night thinking, how did I get here? Why am I doing this? Do I really want to have this type of life, or would you like to just be retired? But I think there's something in there that sort of calls for action. If is there anything that you wish somebody would have told you when you were young? Because this is a podcast about building family offices and family communities around entrepreneurship, innovation, venture capital.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family where we really didn't talk about money at all. And I think most women have been left or grown up in a world where money is not a thing that women talk about. Money is not a woman thing. It was always a man thing. Making investments was for men. It certainly wasn't for women. And business was seen as, for women, as something that you maybe do on the side. Like I looking back now, I didn't realize it, but I was an entrepreneur like from the beginning. I was teaching piano to other children when I was like 14 years old, and I set up a whole music school and had pupils and I mean everything. I started building my own first little business, but no one ever said to me, "You're very entrepreneurial and you do really well in business," because it just wasn't the world I was living in. But it was in me, and I loved pioneering and I loved making things happen. And I wish someone had said to me when I was a teenage girl, dream bigger, think like imagine what you could do in the world. Imagine what you could build. Imagine what you could create. Imagine what problems you could solve, and build a life for yourself and your family, doing well and doing good at the same time. I I I grew up with this sense that making money was not a good thing to do. It didn't feel wholesome. Capitalism had a bad taste in my mouth. And so this whole
But
this whole
let
idea.
me interrupt. Let's get back to that because I grew up the same way. So my parents were romantic intellectuals. I grew up in Venezuela. You didn't grow up in America, so people need to know that too. That's very common here, but I never heard the word assets and liabilities until I came
No.
to Boston to do my MBA. And I was like, people are obsessed with money. What is this thing? So let's just put that in the context that maybe it's a good thing to not grow up just chasing money per se.
Yeah, it really wasn't on my agenda. I didn't grow up with the American dream ideal. It was not a spoken about concept or idea. And even this idea of making it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
a thing. And nobody I lived with or lived near with had an idea of trying to make it.
Yeah.
Everybody was just trying to earn a living. There was no sense of we got to get somewhere. We got to achieve something. We got to make it somehow. And I think that's a blessing and a curse for America. I mean it's a wonderful thing and it's a terrible thing all at the same time.
That's true.
It really is two sides of one coin. And I did not have that framework around my life, but it's interesting that the thing that drew me into entrepreneurship and drew me into business was this idea of using business as a vehicle for good. And at the same time, I now think, you know, women in particular, whilst we may be very good at running small businesses, and many women in business today are running small businesses. I can't remember quite what the statistic is about all the percentage of women who operate small businesses, but it's high. It's very high. But less than 2% of all women-owned businesses ever do more than $1 million of revenue a year, like just 2%. So 98% of women are building small businesses, that do less than $1 million a year. And no one ever told me that actually building a big business and driving significant change through building big organizations was a possibility. And I think more women need to still understand that we don't have to play it small. We don't have to think small. We can think big. We can think about building big businesses, and we can take the ceilings off our lives.
That is so important. You see, I realize I've started many companies, and I realized that in my circle or in my tribe, being a successful woman was frowned upon. So
Mm.
if I grew up thinking that if you make money, you had to be a mean person, you had to take it from somebody, you had to be tough.
Yes.
And that was just not natural to me. I
Mm.
have healthy boundaries, but I see looking at other cultures and looking at immigrants or looking at people who are not born into a social class where being extremely proud of your success is common.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
think people try to pull you down, or they don't understand. They tell you you can't do that because, well, I think they're afraid that you're going to fall, and they're not going
Mm.
to be able to help you. But also they feel, well, if they can do it, maybe I could have done it, and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So how do you think we can rephrase that? And you wrote a book about that. But what is
Mm.
the lesson that we can have in our after dinner conversations talking about the positive impact of business, of money? How can we rephrase that?
Well, I love what you said there, Alicia, because the idea that money doesn't have to be sharky or money doesn't have to be nasty, money doesn't have to be mean. I remember I tell this story in my book. The first venture capital deal I ever got to the table, I ended up turning down because the guy was mean.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I realized was if I'm going to be in business, I don't want to do business like that. That's not how I'm going to do business. I don't think I need to do business like that. And I don't want to have partners who do business like that. And I now know I've been in business now for almost 20 years. It's very possible to be in business and to grow large amounts of revenue and to do, to build big companies without having to be a terrible person. Like I can win, you can win, you know, I can do good in the world all at the same time. None of those things are mutually exclusive. I don't need to trample on someone else to be able to get ahead. And that's one of the powerful things about a feminine energy, I think, that women can bring to the business world. We can dilute this toxicity that says, this is the way this is done, and this is the way the world works. And I remember the VC I turned down said to me, if you don't do a deal with us, you will never do a deal with anyone because I will blacklist you. In the VC world, you will get blacklisted. And I was like, I I'm really clear
Watch
now.
me.
If I wasn't sure didn't want to do a deal with you before, I'm really clear now. And I was like, it was like but it was a threat, right? It was like, you take my money or you take no one's money. And I was like, well, then I'm choosing no one's money. Like it's not a difficult choice for me. Um, but at the same time, you're trying to make things happen and you're trying to sort of create a different pathway. But I have since learned that there are pockets of us out here in the universe who have different values and different ways of thinking about it. And it's why I think it's really, really important that women get in the ring. It's really important that women also think about creating wealth, building wealth, investing their wealth, to keep influencing what our money looks like and the way our world looks like, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Oh, that is so precious. Um, but also, it is time for families to recognize that women need to be accepted
Yeah.
as bread. I was the breadwinner of my family for many, many years. So was my daughter for a while. And I think we are unfair when we put a lot of pressure in the male figure of the family to be the sole breadwinner.
Yeah.
As it is as unfair as it is to expect that women don't own their wealth. Now, there's opportunities for everybody. Everybody can do it the way they want. But I think it is time that we recognize that women can be very good at business. Um,
Yes.
and some can be very mean as well. It's not a prerogative, but
It's
that's not the way. That's not the best way. It's not good.
not the only way. There is an
Not the only
alternative.
way. It's not the only way. It's not good for my soul, so I don't do that. One
Mm,
thing that I like to recognize is that there's some times in our lives, or at least there were a few times in my life. I was an immigrant. I left my home country with my kids in two boxes, in two suitcases. There was a bank crisis, so I did make a lot of money and I saved a lot of money. I did everything by the book, and then we had a bank crisis, and I had to make a decision. I said, I don't want to leave here. Um,
mm,
there is something that happens when you make the decision where you want to go against the current. That's a very,
mm,
very, very brave thing to do.
mm.
Where do you go to find the strength to choose your own path? And what is the advice that we can give the other people that could be watching here? Where do you go when you're against the
Mm.
current? Where do you find that strength to say, no, this doesn't work for me?
Yeah. I think that place is quite a lonely place, an inherently lonely place. I've since learned though that when you actively look for people like you can find them. The challenge is, of course, is really being able to listen to yourself. Because if you can listen to yourself and you can listen to your own values, we can actually have courage to be true to ourselves, right? And that's ultimately what that decision comes down to. It's can I be true to myself or not? And often we're making decisions in life against ourselves, like all the time. And those are the decisions I think that get us in the most trouble. When we start acting against our own self and our own instinct of what really is true to us, that's when we start getting off on weird and wonderful paths that don't take us to good places. But I think when we can be true to who we are and our values, and we can listen to our own instincts and we can listen to our own gut instincts, um, we can find courage to follow them and to go after them. And I think when you get used to listening to yourself, you get to be more comfortable in who you are and recognizing who you are. And I personally had to get used to the idea that I am a pioneer and I am typically going first, which means typically people won't think something that I think is a thing, or won't agree with my way of doing something because not everyone else is not doing it yet. And so I had to sort of make peace with my own sense of self of like, I'm always just going to be first. I'm going to be in that 1% of people that is out in front before anyone else is out in front. And I'm making roads for other people to follow. And having to make peace with that gave me again a sense of courage to like, no, it's just who you are. It's okay that everyone else is not like championing the same thing. It's okay. It's just who you are. And you're building pathways, you're creating roads, and other people will follow, but someone has to go first. And so for me, finding courage has been a journey of understanding my own self and of listening to my own self. And then finding people who are doing things in a similar kind of vein, finding your tribe. And particularly as a woman in a space where there are often mostly men, I have found enormous comfort and courage from finding other women trying to do similar things to me, and finding my tribe of people who understand the challenges I am going through or the things that I am trying to do, and finding community in those ways.
So this is really interesting because thank you for that, because finding a tribe is one thing, but if you're a pioneer, you actually need to build the tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the tribe wasn't there. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
And at least
exactly.
for me, it was very confusing to I lived in many countries, and every time I move, it's like, okay, here we go again. Where do I find a
Yeah.
hairdresser? Where do I buy groceries? I have tons of jokes about buying, you know, I don't know, cleaner shampoo because I don't understand the language or something like that. I mean, it's like tons of that, my poor kids. But then it's, what is the one thing that people can do to build that tribe? Is that having conversations, getting together, making sure that you don't get people who disagree with you, or how do you deal with disagreements? And then after that, how do you deal with failure? Because when you're a pioneer, you're setting
Mm.
up the path for
And then
others,
you
but
need,
you're setting it for yourself. So
yeah.
how do you build a tribe? How do you deal with failure? How do you go around that?
Yeah, I think tribe for me is always about values, and finding alignment around um, an issue or a, 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 a way in which I'm pioneering. I have several groups of female entrepreneurs that I'm part of, and female investor groups. You know, you and I met through a female investor group. And having solidarity, and finding people who are kind of trying to push the boundaries in the same way you are, or you've got a common cause that connects you, I think is one of the most powerful ways to try and look for and find your tribe. But as you said, as a pioneer, you're constantly going to be sort of going ahead and maybe waiting for other people to catch up, and maybe sometimes even creating the pathway to build a tribe around you. And that has been my experience of building a company. Is you're building a tribe of people around you when you build a company who want to go on the mission that you are going on, to solve the problem that you are trying to solve with your business. And so I have also in my life found solidarity through building a company and pioneering and going on a mission and bringing other people with me on that mission.
That's fantastic. Yeah. What do you think you want your legacy to be?
Oh, that's a great question. I would love my legacy for it to be really clear about the things that I cared about in my life, and that I hopefully made a dent in some of the issues that I cared about. Um, it's interesting. We've just, as I said, mentioned we've just launched a new travel company, and this travel company will also be a travel/climate company, and that we're also doing large scale carbon development at the same time as developing 5-star eco lodging. So working in wilderness areas around the world to preserve and protect wild places. And when I told my oldest son, who's 16 now, that our mission was to see if we could sequester 1 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere a year, thinking that's a great legacy. If my husband and I, as our contribution, one of our contributions to the world could be that the work that we've done is now sequestering 1 million more tons of carbon from the atmosphere. And I sat down and we were talking to our kids, and my oldest son said, "Is that it?"
I told you you
I was
love
thinking,
it.
well, I was feeling like that was quite a big number. And I said to him, the first project we're working on now will do 100,000 tons, and that's going to be quite hard to do 100,000 tons. And this is like 10 times that, 1 million is 10 times that. And he just looked at me, Mom, he said, "Mom, you're just thinking too small." And
I
I
read
was
the
like,
book.
well, exactly. I was like, well, there we go. Maybe my legacy is right there, with this constant idea of do not think small, keep thinking bigger, keep whatever whatever that, whatever arena that is, to just imagine something more is possible than you could ever imagine.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think it's also wonderful to see that our kids challenge us and prompt us
Yes.
to think bigger. That has been my biggest win, just to have my kids. My kids are older now, and then they have grandkids. They have kids, actually. I have grandkids. They have kids. I'm not a great grandma. But it is really interesting to see. I always think in multiples, and I always, when I started my career teaching entrepreneurship, that part, I always told people, especially women, but also people that came from rural areas like I did, from
Mm.
town mentalities. I always told them, okay, you do this business plan, now multiply that by 100. How are you
Yes.
going to do that? Because you don't do that by working harder. You have to
No.
differently.
Yeah.
And the thing that I realized, and that's why I have my theme is wealth. The thing that I realized is that you cannot create wealth if you don't distribute it. So that's what
Mm.
I'm passionate about, these bigger changes in thinking differently, especially
Yeah.
with the technology changes. Yeah. Sarah, it's
100%.
been delightful to hear from you. Do you have one more word of advice and how people contact you?
Yes. So if people want to reach out to me or connect with me or ask me questions about my book, Thinking Bigger, you can find me on my website, www.sarahhdusek.com.
Great. Thank you so much. A pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for listening. And this is Wealthy Talks. It is so exciting to talk to people who have reinvented themselves and have done things that they never thought it was possible. That was my experience. That is something that I share with my kids and with my grandkids. And we can only go as far as we think that we can go. That's why I don't really believe in potential, because I think potential is constraining. I think it's just the exploration and the growth that keeps us invigorated, excited, inspired. And when I was talking to my kids and my grandkids, especially the girls that are so focused on dancing and studying and just doing everything by the book, no matter the effort of their parents and of myself, I look at Sarah and what Sarah is doing. So I was excited to bring her in. Sarah and I share a lot of things. We come from families where, just commercialization was not right there. And we just share a lot of exciting discoveries about what we can and cannot do. I didn't grow up thinking that being a woman would prevent me from doing anything. My dad was really, really encouraging to, you can do whatever you want. And that was a different upbringing. I lived in 9 countries, and then I realized that societies in developed countries tend to put women in sort of a bucket that you have to be nice, you have to be good, you have to do this or that. Whereas I grew up in Venezuela, where women can do everything, and they're exciting, and they are smart, and they have this big assertiveness, and they want to enjoy their families, they want to enjoy life, they want to enjoy their bodies. They don't take rubbish from anybody. So that was my upbringing, and this is what I tried to bring to my kids. And I just think it was really interesting to hear somebody else talking from a completely different culture, and now going from Europe to the US to reinvent herself, and now living in Africa. I can't wait to go and meet her. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sarah Dusek. She is very focused on supporting women about thinking bigger, and she has 2 boys, kids. So I think that was really interesting. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. We talked a lot about what we learned from her. And last Christmas, December 2024, I gave my granddaughters the gift of her book about thinking bigger. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in to our Wealthing Talks. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. To stay connected, visit us at wealthing.com. This is Alicia Castillo Holley, your host, and until next time, yours in Wealthing.